Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Cathy Horst-Forsyth, and I'm here with Sean McCormack, who will introduce himself in a moment. We're talking about one of my favorite topics, though, and that is real-world tech transformation. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but what I can tell you about this is that when it works well, then business goes and grows, and when it fails, you spend a lot of money, and a lot of people talk about it. And that's the business I've grown up in consulting within large enterprise. So happy to unpack it here today, and more importantly, just hear the secrets of success behind tech transformation, and hopefully do that without too much jargon. So if you guys, we should have given out bingo cards with buzzwords to see how much we break our own rules. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce, or have you introduce yourself, Sean,
Sure.
and tell us a little bit about your current role and where you're from and what keeps you busy all day.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Sean McCormack. Fly-by background, start off in military intelligence, nothing to do with technology. Went in the startup world, did 4 startups. Then went to the dark side, to the enterprise world, and I did Millicors, Manpower Group, Harley-Davidson, Grainger, and now First Student, that's owned by EQT Private Equity. And the role here is CIO. When I joined, I'd say it was a fragmented role. You had a lot of technology in different parts of the organization, and one of the key things I focused on was consolidating technology, PMO, innovation, delivery, field technologies and support, all of that into a single organization. And that was important because as we get into transformation, it was important that as a single organization, we had the ability to drive a lot of changes. So the current role pretty much encompasses anything you can think of, from the technology strategy for the company, to the innovation capabilities, digital and analytics. We have the project management office, so all the delivery that goes with that, cybersecurity. So pretty much if you name it, chances are, if it's technology related, it falls within my organization.
Which means it's business related too, as
Yep.
we'll talk about a little bit. So my
Yep.
first question is a very practical question. With all those responsibilities and technology being what it is, a very fragile, ever-changing, non-static thing, how do you choose what you focus on every day? What gets your attention, and how do you make sure that you can stay focused when you're pivoting to kind of the emergency of the day?
Yeah, it's difficult. So First Student, they're the largest provider of student transportation in North America. So we have 60,000 employees, 46,000 vehicles, makes us one of the 3 largest private fleets in North America. And we move more people every day than all the airlines combined. So there's a lot happening. So it's challenging. I'm fanatical about my calendar. I'm very focused on time management. And every year we do the top 5. What are the top 5 priorities for us as an organization, tied to an overall strategy? So trying to make sure we have a clear strategy, and then what do we have to accomplish this year to enable that strategy. And then on a daily basis, I have what I call my MIT, my most important thing. And my most important thing is what I have to accomplish that day, and it should all be tied to it. And then the rest is just filler. And my calendar is tied to that. I try to carve out time to accomplish my most important task. I think the hard thing is, I've worked for a lot of people that had different strengths. Some of them were visionary and strategists. Others were really good at innovation. Others were just really good operators and focused on delivery. And the problem is, I think to be a successful CIO, you actually have to do all of it.
You do.
And
yeah.
I've been in organizations where you had a change of leadership, and you had one person that was very focused on strategy, and their boss that came in was focused on execution, or the opposite. You had someone that was really good at execution, the boss that came in was focused on innovation, and you had a mismatch. And so I've learned over the years that, unfortunately, you have to do it all. I always think about what are all the things I need to have in place so that whoever comes in as my next CEO or leader, they don't see a failure in our organization. So that means balancing transformation, which is my primary focus, and innovation, but balancing that with disaster recovery and cybersecurity and delivering
Can't do one without the other. That's the tricky thing, right? It has to be a stable foundation for you to build. And but what I'm hearing you say is it's intentional. It's not an accident. You were completely purposeful about my most important thing today. And then cool. And I want to come back to the idea of all those disciplines and how you build teams. But first, let's just jump more into transformation. So tech transformation, digital transformation, whoever's keeping score on buzzword bingo,
modernization.
Start writing down. Start writing down the terms. It means a lot of different things to people, and I think we all agree now it's not just about the technology and the foundation, it's about business innovation. But maybe you can talk about process change, or approach change as one element of it, and we'll talk about some tech and business change too. But one of your favorite examples across, that's a lot of enterprise experience, knowing that your career spans beyond that, but one of your favorite examples and how it went.
Yeah, sure. So I think, first of all, you have to define what is transformation. And to me, transformation is you have to have a starting point and you have to have an end point. has to be pretty clear where you're trying to get to, and it has to be measurable. You have to be able to show that you made progress, and it has to be meaningful. Doing upgrades to systems doesn't really matter that much, but it has to be meaningful for the business, not just for technology's sake. So to me, any transformation is really focused on business outcomes, and technology is just the enabler. So I'd say one example of transformation was when I was at Miller Coors, and at the time, nobody had heard of Agile. This was the early 2000s, and I had just come out of the startup world. And even in the startup world, Agile really wasn't a term. You had different practices, but it hadn't really been codified yet. And I went to Miller Coors that was very much waterfall. And one of the things I realized pretty quickly was it took $1 million in a year to deliver pretty much any project, no matter what it was. And that's very hard as an enterprise to make progress if your delivery is that slow. So I introduced the concept of Agile, had some good successes early on, and actually got to the point where we had the largest project in the company come along, and I knew the only way we could deliver it was through Agile. And so we went through an Agile transformation, where as an entire enterprise, we adopted Agile. And that was my first, I think, real experience with transformation, because it was changing not just the IT delivery mechanisms, but it was literally changing the culture of the company. We had the CEO in daily stand-ups. We had the sales team using Scrum planning cycles. We had SAP teams, which at the time nobody thought SAP could do it. We introduced the ability to do delivery across multiple continents, scaled teams, and we're very successful, to the point that actually, I know we have ThoughtWorks here. The CEO of ThoughtWorks at the time flew in to see what we were doing, because it was one of the first enterprises to actually deliver Agile at scale.
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s, yeah. We had Wells Fargo, Accenture actually helped them develop their Agile methodology, because they were the consultant firm for us. But that was a good introduction for me to transformation. And it wasn't truly a technology transformation, it was more of a process transformation.
Right, which to me almost reads harder in the sense that you're changing ways of working, another buzzword. People, culture, you have executive alignment. Any thoughts you have looking back on that, and critical success factors, or looking back on it, how you made it happen?
Yeah.
And we're so early on before everyone else had the blueprint of how to do it?
I think a lot of it was luck, honestly. There's things that we did the right way that at the time we didn't know we were doing the right way, and now it's become part of my playbook. But I think one was really trying to be clear on why we were doing this, and we had to convince people of the value of Agile. You had a lot of people that just didn't believe it, and one of the things we really highlighted was the business value. That what we were trying to change was the entire culture, and we had a lot of business partners that were frustrated because they would stand up a project, and we would spend months trying to solicit all the requirements that they could possibly think of. And then we would go in execution and tell them, don't talk to us. And then we come back at the very end and we'd say, okay, now test what we've delivered. And normally you didn't have enough time, so you had to shrink the testing cycle, or you'd run over budget. And by the time we delivered what they needed, it was the market conditions already changed. And so we really tried to focus on, this isn't for the sake of technology, this is for the sake of the business. We're trying to find out from you what's your most important thing, and we're going to go after that first, and we're going to work on it rapidly together. Get it in your hands, test it, get it into the business so you start to get the value, and then we'll go after the next item. And this allows you as a business to change requirements, which you need to do. It allows you to get business value quickly, and also to get to a point where maybe you don't need to work on that anymore, and we can go focus on something else. Whereas in traditional delivery methods, you would capture every requirement, even if it was a low value requirement, because you didn't want to miss anything. So I think probably the biggest thing I got out of that was really focusing on explaining to the business the value that you're driving.
Why you care, what's in it for you, that sort of thing. I have to say that's the plainest, most logical explanation of Agile that I've heard.
Thank you.
I mean, that is not one of my favorite buzzwords. I think people use it in all different contexts, but it's the back and forth, and the business, of course, does care. And there's a lot in it for them. So, and I've grown up in tech, and a lot of transformation has been about risk mitigation or cost reduction. You just described that. There's nothing wrong with that. But of course, in today's world, it's all about business innovation and revenue and how to monetize tech, and you can have arguments about the title of a tech leader and whether or not business leader, but flip the script a little and take us maybe forward to current times and how you're helping to drive revenue, monetize, build product, and insert blank. That's a different flavor of business value through tech transformation.
Sure, yeah. I'd say one good example is Harley-Davidson. When I was at Harley-Davidson, we were a Harley-Davidson Motor Company. I was the chief technology officer, and the entire focus was on the analog experience. There was actually a belief that as a consumer, all I wanted to do was get on a motorcycle. I didn't want to look at a phone, do anything along those lines, and just go for a ride. I built an innovation capability, and we did a lot of user testing, and we found out pretty quickly that wasn't the case. That one of the biggest challenges riders had was being able to plan a ride. So if I'm a Harley rider, I've got 20 other people I want to do a ride with. We're trying to figure out this scenic ride, which Google Maps isn't good for because it's going to give you the most efficient route. So I want to have this
trucks.
Yeah. So I want to have this scenic ride that I can go on, and I want to plan it across multiple people, have all these stops. And we found out very quickly that there were a lot of things like that that the consumer wanted. So I think that's a good example of where, again, we focused on the business value, the end user, and how technology can enable that, and ended up building an entire digital strategy. And then with that, I got selected to head up their new digital business unit, and we developed a whole new riding capability, connected vehicle, connected retail, customer 360, just a lot of really cool enabling capabilities. Got into video games, all kinds of fun stuff. So to me, that was an example of, again, just focused on the business
Huge
value.
customer value.
Yeah, huge customer.
And loyalty. Well, not that Harley Davidson consumers aren't incredibly loyal, but stickier brand, better experience.
Yeah, very much so. And then if you look at first student, I think a couple good examples. One is we launched a new business called First Alt. One of the challenges that we had was we have a lot of special needs children and a lot of homeless youth. And they had I'd say, suboptimal experience where we were sending these large yellow buses to pick them up. That wasn't a great experience for the child because you want to have a more personalized experience, and there's a lot of equipment and other things that need to come with it. Also wasn't ideal for us because we have a lot of drivers that hold a CDL license. And if any of you have kids, you probably know that there's a huge shortage of bus drivers across the entire US, and it's impacting the ability for any bus operator to provide service. So we looked at it as their way to launch a new business model that would allow us to use third parties that we vetted and work with them to provide a fleet of vehicles and drivers and a much more personalized experience, and do that completely digitally enabled. So we launched a completely new business, partnered with ThoughtWorks on it, and we were able to get to market in 9 months, build an entire new business in 9 months and launch it in market. Wow. And we've had phenomenal growth since. So I think that's a good example of the revenue side, really driving revenue. Another example is we launched an app called First View, and that's allowing parents to track where their children are. Key thing is you want to know, you're at work, you need to make sure you show up at the bus stop on time to get your kid, and we have GPS-enabled capabilities to allow you to track the bus. And that was a good example of something that I think was a brand enhancer, where we were able to put something in the hands of customers, who also are the parents, and give them the capability they didn't have before. And I think a third example would be using data and analytics. One of the biggest challenges we had is because of the driver shortage, it was really hard to hire drivers. And we had a massive effort as a company to go get drivers in the door quickly. But one of the challenges we had is we couldn't see from the start when someone applies all the way through to when they're driving a bus and bringing in revenue, what is that experience like and how long is it taking them? So we built an analytics product that tied all the different systems together and looked at the dwell times every step of the way. How much time am I spending interviewing? How much time am I spending doing background and drug screening? How much time do I spend in training? And with that, we were able to map it out and then actually identify some significant bottlenecks in that training pipeline. And that allowed us to not only fix it, but in the end drove organizational changes. We actually restructured things within the organization to make that entire pipeline more efficient and to improve it for the candidates so they had a better experience. So I think that's a good example of taking something simple, analytics, but really driving business value, where it not only improved things for the drivers, but it drove business value by allowing us to get people through faster.
Everything. Internal employee, stakeholder, customer, and revenue. It's kind of checking a lot of boxes. Yeah. So in your current role, how did those innovative ideas come to fruition? How are you partnering with different leadership roles, business? I call it the business, the black hole of the business, but I'm curious about that because in large businesses, often business wants and does what they want, and IT is there kind of trying to standardize it, control it, and collaboration is a new process, as silly as that sounds. And you've given several examples that are really compelling where you brought product quickly and value quickly to the market. But what's behind the scenes? Like, how did you orchestrate it with other business leaders and stakeholders?
Yeah. I think a mistake a lot of technology leaders make is they talk in technology terms, and they don't really understand the business. And it's hard to partner with someone if you can't partner on the same thing. And it's something I learned probably a manpower group. I had the opportunity to report to a CMO and head of strategy, and got coached significantly about how I sucked at communicating with the business at the time, because I was a technologist and I was talking about, servers and versions and upgrades. And the lady that I worked for was phenomenal, and she just taught me how to communicate in business terms. But first of all, that means you have to understand the business.
Right.
And then two, how do you really take technology off the table and speak in business value terms? And I've used that ever since. So when I joined First Student, the first thing I did was I did location visits. I went to depots and actually got to see firsthand how do we run the business. We have location manager onboarding, which is when we hire a new person to run a location, we put them through training. I actually went through that training for a week, like a location manager, just to understand what's their experience like, what systems are they using, how do they operate. And then I required everybody on my team to do the same thing. I had people on my team that had been there for 15 years and never actually been to a location or even talked to an end user that was using the systems that they were developing.
Yeah.
And so I made sure my team had the same insight. And then as part of that, we asked a lot of questions. We did I did a technology showcase where I set up a series of meetings across every business unit and said, okay, come in, help us understand what technology you're using, how it's helping the business, how it's hurting the business, and then what would your priorities be. And the CEO and I sat through almost 15 hours over several weeks, meeting with each business unit. And they gave us the insights that we needed to say, okay, here's the priorities. It was pretty simple. Ask the business what their problem is, how can technology help? They give you the answer, and then you prioritize to go after it.
But you came at it with empathy because you took the time to. So the obvious question is, did you drive a bus?
I did not. And actually, I would have.
You need a license for that.
It's a fairly complicated process. Good news is, if you have kids on school buses, I promise you the training that they go through is phenomenal. It's not just learning how to drive a bus. It's safety training, it's behavioral training. There's so much that comes with it. So it's fairly complicated. It would be probably 4 months of training for me to get through.
And at this point in your career, did you know that was the job that you signed up for, or did you get there and realize in order to do the CIO job, you needed to go deep? I mean, it was a learned approach by them, but you think they wanted you to do that? Know they needed it, or was it a surprise for everyone? Like, wow.
I think EQT was really good about explaining the situation I was coming into. So I honestly didn't have any surprises, which is different than a lot of other companies I've gone to. But I think everybody understood at a surface what the challenges were. By me being able to do those visits and talking to end users and partnering with the business, I think we found some pinch points that people weren't aware of before. A good example is the analytics product I talked about. That was part of a simple data discovery that we did, where we just went and met with all the stakeholders and said, hey, tell us, what are your data challenges? And they said, well, we can't even see end-to-end what the experience is. Great, now we have an idea. So we put together a little team, did a POC. Is this something we could go after? Put it in front of them, got their feedback, and then rapidly iterated on it, and within 3 months had a full product.
Cool. I think that's a really good piece of practical advice.
Yeah.
Sounds simple, not easy to do, but it's it's empathy. So I'm going to come to you guys, anyone in the room who wants to ask a question in a few minutes, but you're telling a story over some number of years now, approaching on decades of experience. Looking back, what's changed about driving transformation? What's gotten better? Where's going to be some comparatives, like if you think about how it was in the early 2000s and how it is now. Are there common themes? Has something changed? Does something surprise you that in our current times?
Yeah.
I'll ask you to look forward too, but we'll start with that.
I think what surprised me is I didn't appreciate early on that the main challenge with transformation is people. That you can put the technology in, it's getting people to actually adopt the change. And so I've spent a significant amount of time really trying to understand the psychology of people. How do you communicate change? How do you do change management? Because ultimately that's the hardest part, is getting people to adopt it. So I think that part hasn't changed. What's gotten harder is the options that are out there. If you look at in the past, transformation was putting in ERP, right? 10, 15 years ago, you put in a large ERP system. That was a transformation for the company. Or a PLM, you put in these major systems, but you didn't have too many options in the market, and it was a pretty proven path. Now you have so many options on different ways you can transform a company, so many different vendors. Every executive is flying on a plane, reading an article, and they'll come back and tell you why this technology or this vendor is going to be game changing. So I think it's really hard to just manage that, and you have fairly empowered business leaders now that can go choose to adopt a different platform if they want. So you have to do a lot to really manage the political landscape and make sure you're part of that conversation. You're viewed as a
tough
partner.
one.
It's,
Yeah.
it's super tough. Yeah.
Shadow IT, whatever term you want to assign to that. How do you manage that? Or how are you managing that?
One was through the consolidation, so making sure I
Yeah.
had a purview of all that. I think two is being viewed as a partner, where they realize I'm there to help
Is
them.
there ever a circumstance where it's like go off and build your own, because
we've had a few.
do it your way, could
Yeah.
agree to disagree? I
Yeah.
don't.
I'd say not too many. We put in a pretty strong governance process
Yeah.
where anything technology related in the company, I sit down with the CEO, the COO, CMO, all the C titles, and we actually talk about everything in the pipeline. And I highlight everything, all the demand that's coming across the company. Where is our money going? Where do we want it to go? What are the priorities? And that makes it easier because then it's not so much Sean trying to push back or make a call.
Sure.
Now it's a collective
It's not
view.
coming from nowhere.
Yeah, it's a collective view as a leadership team.
And frankly, if you don't do that, how can you secure and stabilize and standardize and build something that's scalable? You cannot.
Right.
And that's a large part of the job, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I try to drive a lot of transparency where, again, I'm viewed as a partner, but also there's full transparency as to what's happening, and it makes it hard for shadow IT to occur.
You could say, yeah.
Because we're talking
It's
about
got to
it.
get through the pipeline, sure.
Yeah.
Anybody want to ask a question? We have one in the room. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Yasir Bashir. I'm the CEO of this company called Artisoft.
Yeah.
My question is, what's an acceptable failure rate on digital transformation journeys? Or in your own case, for every success, how many failures would you count?
It's a good question. I've definitely had failures, which is how you learn. When we stood up the innovation program at Harley, we had a target of 10% success rate. The expectation was most of what we did was going to fail, and that was good. We actually wanted things to go through rapid, get to failure as quickly as possible because only the good ideas would succeed. So I think normally anything that we do, we try to start as a POC. There's very little in this world that I would go after as a major transformational initiative if I haven't done a multiple series of POCs on it, because that helps me start to prove very quickly, is there any value in this? Or even
And if a POC fails, is that a fail? Or that's like,
in most cases, I mean, you can take
really
a couple
failure,
runs at it.
like-
Yeah, well, yeah, it's not failure. I mean, that's a good thing
Yeah,
because I know that's
exactly.
not a place to put my time. So I think the first filter would be what I would consider kind of that POC filter, and I expect a high failure rate there. I think once you get past that, then we'll do a pilot. Now you get more into the 50% success range, and then once I get to a full production implementation, there you should be 90%. If you're putting a lot of people and resources and dollars behind something large, you want it to succeed. But that's why I try to fail early on to vet only the ideas that I'm confident will succeed.
fast and early?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
You mentioned getting people to adopt behavioral change is
Yeah.
very difficult. What have you found? What strategies are most successful?
Yeah. I went through training years and years ago that completely changed my perspective, and it was about the physiological impact of change. So if you were to think about any change in your life, kid leaving the house or going off to school or a divorce or you're moving, your title has changed, your boss has changed, all those have a emotional and physiological impact. And I think oftentimes as leaders we disregard that and we just think, oh, it's a change, what's the big deal, why is everybody freaking out? Once you realize any change you introduce is going to have that impact, you start to approach it very differently because now you really try to focus on the what's in it for me. That it gives you the empathy to understand, okay, no matter what change I introduce, I'm doing something to this person. I'm changing a process that they've known for years. I'm taking away technology they may have implemented. I'm changing an org structure, and now they're worried about their job. And with that filter, you have to focus a lot more on the human being, the individual. What are your different categories of people? What are the different ways you need to communicate to them? How do you help them understand why this is going to be beneficial? In some cases, you have changes that are painful. How do you address that as quickly as possible and help people get the answers that they need? Am I going to have a job? Things like that. So I think that was the biggest one is once you understand the human component of it, it's easier to have effective change. I'd say the changes that I've seen fail are ones where someone comes in, does a presentation at a big town hall, hey, here's the change, and then they walk away and they think it's done. And really that's just the start of the change. And if you don't answer the human element, it's destined to fail because you'll immediately have resistance.
So double clicking on that, because I think that's really important. And again, empathy comes into the conversation at a very programmatically, how did you operationalize that? How do you think about anticipating the change, walking them through? I mean, this is all about change management in simple terms. But the human beings, especially in mass at scale, are hard to predict. So any kind of tips or tricks of the trade to really have people come along?
Yeah. So I was blessed to work with a PhD in change management from Accenture.
Okay.
When I was driving a major change many years ago. And she showed me that there really is a systematic approach to change. And it's, what is the change? What's the current state? What's the future state? What are all the different people being impacted? How are their lives being impacted? What are the incentives we want to give them? What are the carrots, carrots? What are the sticks?
What's in it for them, and what if they don't?
Yeah, what if they don't?
Yeah.
And then what are all the different venues that you're going to communicate to them? Because if let's say I'm putting in, I don't know, AI. Everyone's talking about AI. So I'm putting in an AI capability. You're going to have engineers that are probably excited about it. You may have developers that worry about losing their job. You may have people in the business that are scared because they don't understand it and they don't want to look dumb. And so you have all these different groups, and the way you communicate to each of them is totally different. And so it's really being systematic about what is the change, and then how do you go about it across all those audiences and all those venues. Some people are going to do very well visually. Some people are going to do very well hands-on. You really have to address all that.
Very purposeful.
Yeah,
I
very
mean,
purposeful.
this is not, we'll drive a program and put a Gantt chart together and that's our change management program. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, and
that's
it's
a critical
prolonged.
success factor, right?
Yeah, and it's prolonged. I mean, it's many months, if not sometimes years.
Yep.
In trying to drive a change.
I believe that. How do you get your alignment board down? Has that any tricks of the trade in terms of telling, leadership broadly what it's going to look like, and then asking for their support, or have they gotten in your way? I guess we can flip it.
Yeah, I think one, keep it really simple. I think a mistake a lot of people make is they make it way too complicated. Normally you have a single change you're trying to drive. What is that? How do you boil it down to be as simple as possible where it clicks and people remember it? Two, how do you make it visual? I read a book called Switch, and there was a story that really stuck with me where he talked about someone who was trying to drive change. He worked at a manufacturing company, and they had all these gloves that they bought. He was in procurement, like 3,000 different types of gloves. And he kept going to the board and everyone trying to convince them that they needed to consolidate and only purchase a few sets. And he put all these charts up, and everyone nodded their head, but he could never get the funding to actually drive a project to fix it. And so finally, out of frustration, the board came in to a room like this, and he had a table set up, and on the table were 3,000 different pairs of gloves. And he had the board walk up and say, okay, tell me the difference between this glove and that glove. They look the same. Okay, well, how much is this one? This one's $50. How much is this one? This one's $10. Why are we buying $50 gloves if you can have the $10 glove? And it was a visual, emotional response.
Took that much, yeah.
And once he did that, everything changed. They got it. But it was visual and it was emotional. So anytime I'm trying to communicate to the board or anyone else, I try to keep it really simple, but then I try to make it where there's a visual and emotional response. And just one quick example, when I joined First Student, they had tried for years to get in an HRIS system. 60,000 people, and there was no HRIS system, which is crazy. And probably 5-6 years in a row, people had brought stuff to the board, built a business case, and just couldn't get it approved. The only thing that I did that was different is I took all the stuff they had done, but I actually walked them through the process of what a candidate experience was like and what an employee experience was like using the current processes, and highlighted literally step by step, screenshot by screenshot, document by document.
Dragged them through it.
Yeah. When we try to hire a driver, here's the document that we sent to them that they have to print out, they have to sign, then they have to scan or fax back,
Ooh, fax.
which gets emailed to somebody else who hand keys this into a system. I just walked through how painful it was. Once they saw that, the light bulb went off. And so I think, again, it's all people and emotions. And if you can get that emotional response where they're like, why the hell, this is nuts. Then you
They're
get
on your side.
Yeah, then you get the support that you need.
And I think sometimes in technology, the trap is getting jargony and complicated, and we're engineers, and many are, and like to sound like engineers. And but what you've been describing is simplicity and humanity and really empathy. So words you don't hear in every panel.
Yeah.
I want to go back and talk a little bit about team building and team motivating and team, because you can't do it by yourself,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
None of this happens by yourself. You're kind of aligning stakeholders and different business groups and leadership, but ultimately you need a team of people you can trust. So good news is you've got career and you've probably found some reliable people, but now I hear this a lot across our client base, finding great people who really want to work hard, who really care and want to get it done, no matter how hard the work is getting harder and harder. So what's your perspective on that?
I actually haven't seen that much, to be honest.
Good.
And even, I'd say even in the younger generations, my daughter's 21, and I really haven't even seen it across her age group. So I think I'm more optimistic than maybe some other people are. You and I talked about how I do think there's cultural differences. If you go to the West Coast versus East Coast, Midwest, South, you'll definitely see differences, but I think those are multi-generational. A person in the South, whether they're 21 or 50, chances are the way they view work and life balance is going to be different than somebody that's in New York. But I actually haven't seen that many challenges.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have sort of a core team that you've brought with you along to these different
Yeah.
assignments?
I think anyone that's been doing this for a while in leadership, you tend to have some people that just can deliver, and you try to bring them with you. I also try to bring in new people because there's a lot of good experience out there, and just because I haven't worked with them doesn't mean they're not good. Yeah. And I'm pretty big on trying to build a diversified team. Going back to the mistake a lot of leaders make is they focus on one thing too much, and I know where my strengths and weaknesses are. I try to have a balanced team. I need an executor, someone that I know can deliver. I need the maverick that's going to push the system and try to get things done, even if they ruffle feathers. I need the historian that's going to tell me all the reasons why the change I'm about to drive isn't going to work, and all the times it's failed in the past, because that gives me insights into what to address. I need the strategist and the innovator. So I really try to build
intentional, purposeful.
Intentional.
Yeah.
And one thing that has helped me significantly is I hired a regional vice president from operations into my team, and they essentially have a business architecture role, and that was huge because going back to having credibility as a technology organization, it's hard for people to argue with us when I have someone that ran the entire Chicago and Milwaukee region, one of the largest regions in the company, from a business perspective. And we actually run everything through him first before we take it out. Does this make sense? Are we communicating the right way? And so I also think when you're building a technology team, try to bring people in that actually know the business, because it helps a lot.
So they're not here to answer this question.
No.
If I ask them, why do you want to work for Sean? Why do you stay with Sean? What do you think as a leader, helps these great, set of workers stay with you, work hard for you, drive for the business, but for you too, they're a leader.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? This is really important stuff.
Yeah.
It's simple, but it's
Yeah,
important.
that's a good question.
I'll
speak for them.
I'm making you blush, I know.
I'll speak for them. Hopefully I get it right. I'd say one, we get stuff done. You want to, if you're going to work, you want to be somewhere where you can look back with pride on what you accomplished. And I'm not someone that's just going to run status quo for 4 years. I want to drive and make things better. And so I think if you join my team, you have that same drive. You want to make things better. You want to feel like at the end of the day you accomplished something. So I think that's one. Two, they know that I care about them as a human being. And I'm going to, just a simple example is I do personalized birthday and anniversary cards for everybody on the team. And it's a small thing.
Small things matter.
Yeah,
I've
it's
learned.
impactful because I actually learned it from a VP that used to do it to me. I still remember her because she took the time to do that. So I know that I care about them as a human being, and I'm going to invest in their development. I want to see them succeed. I'm going to help them grow. And then 3, we have fun. We try to, I don't want it just to be a drag. I want it to be a fun place to come to where you're excited and you wake up every morning.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Anybody out in the audience? Last call for questions in our audience here.
Yep.
How do you prioritize the project and its success rate? Let me rephrase the question a little different. Do you take projects coming from the business need, or IT gets a new shiny tool like AI? Okay, let us find the business case for that. How do you prioritize?
Yeah.
The CIO or CITO?
I'm really looking for impact. And sometimes it may not even be a true technology change. Sometimes we come across something where, if I create a simple report, it's not really a transformational capability, but the impact is huge because it's something they never had insights into before. So I really care about impact. If you look at AI, that's something we've stood up an entire council around. and we're fishing for use cases. We have probably 50 different use cases. We have 5 that we're already doing POCs on. Honestly, we haven't found a lot of places where we think that's going to have immediate impact. I still want to invest in it because eventually we're going to find the value. But ultimately, I care about impact. And so sometimes that means cool, shiny stuff you're going after. Sometimes it's really boring,
Practical
operational,
stuff,
process automation. But to me, that's what matters in the end because that's what's going to drive value for everybody.
Makes sense to me. So as you look forward now we just look forward, we look back. What are you excited about? Are you concerned about anything?
Yeah.
In the kind of technology realm, hallucinations, has anyone counted that one several times today? Doesn't sound good.
Definitely AI, and both positive and negative. I think AI is going to fundamentally transform our entire world, and in some ways that's really good. I think we're going to hopefully cure cancer and discover new drugs and make life a lot better for people, new energy sources. But I also think it's going to introduce a lot of pretty scary stuff. You look at deep fakes and political unrest and cybercrime. So that's one that, to me, it's kind of like nuclear energy. You had really positives came out of it, and really negatives, and ultimately it depends on how we apply it as a human race.
Yeah, good use case for red wine in my
Yeah,
case. It sort of
exactly,
takes the edges off some of those things.
Yeah.
If I could ask a question, are you
Please.
more sensitive to the risks of AI because you're responsible for kids, I guess? Does that make your company more sensitive to the risks?
Potentially. I was talking before we started, there's positive use cases for AI. We're looking at AI cameras that'll help us identify hazards on the road. I'm getting too close to somebody, pedestrians come across them that I may not see. So there's a lot of safety that we can drive with it. We're also looking at safety of children. So I think there's a lot of positive that comes with it. We would never deploy something that I think there was any risk associated with for children. I think where I get a little nervous is a good example is route management. You're seeing a lot of people go after AI for logistics and being able to organize routes. There's been some other competitors in the market that have done some of that and had pretty bad experiences where things got really messed up. And so that's where I get a little nervous is the more likely the impact if something goes wrong, the more hesitant I'm going to be. Yeah.
I have a question. So as an IT leader, you guys control the, say, Windows patching and systems like that, right? Then the autonomous vehicle comes.
Yeah.
Do you want NTSB to manage the patching, or your team will decide what to patch, what not to patch?
For autonomous vehicles? Ooh, that's a good one.
Autonomous buses.
Yeah,
That's
autonomous buses.
freaky.
Eventually,
Yeah.
it's going to be the computer getting updated on the weekend or something like
Yeah.
that. Right? So
I think
how
if,
do you see yourself as a technology leader who will say, because I'm a CIO, so
Yeah.
we decide what to patch, what not to patch.
Yeah.
What about the vehicles?
Yeah. So going back to your point, I actually think autonomous buses for kids will be the last bastion.
Use case.
Yeah, the last use case, not the first. I think you'll wait till all consumers
we're
have
on board
adopted
with
it. Yeah. But I think that's something you would want centrally managed because there's so much that goes into it, right? It affects cybersecurity, it affects your enterprise architecture. There's bandwidth costs. Everything. So to me, that's one that would be centralized. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I could ask you a few more questions, but I'm out of time.
Yeah.
We are out of time. It was really lovely to hear, and I
Thank you.
think really on point in a very straightforward way to hear what you've learned. So thank you for sharing that with the audience, and thank you all for the great
Excellent.
questions.
Thank you for making
too.
it. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you.